Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Gamey Daddy channel. Today I have a discussion that I wanted to start up in the community, and this has basically, spurred up again because of what's happened to Cyberpunk 2077, where it's in a developmental spiral and we are not even certain when we're going to play this game so far. Now, we've received another release date, which is December the 10th. But a game like that to launch in December is a phenomenon on its own. I have basically followed video game releases, and I have not heard of a major AAA title that launched in the middle of December. But you never know. CD Projekt Red is that company that has that Slavic magic, and they could just pull that off. Who knows? But I think this is one of the opportunities that I can just take to say that game development is somewhat of a very huge enterprise. And I know for the longest time as a Division content creator, I've been very critical of the development of the game in many areas where I felt it was lacking. Now, I was doing this because I was very, very ignorant as to what it takes to make a video game. And I started to do a little bit more research. I wanted to know, I was curious, why are we seeing these different deficiencies in gaming, especially when we were seeing the loot box craze from the 2016-2017 when the gaming community had a huge uproar. And then, many gaming companies started to, back away from that. Some stayed heavy on it, like EA with their Star Wars Battlefront 2 issue that they had. And then you had these other games, and you had then EA with games that were unfinished, like Anthem. Not bashing on Anthem, but then we have a game like Tom Clancy's The Division 2. It came out where you had a level progression from 1 through 30, and then they started to add and taper on the end game content. Right now, The Division 2 has more content than many other games in its category, and we seem to, in an aspect, demand a lot more from the developers. And in many cases, it's rightly so. But I wanted to, also go ahead and say that there are different levels from my research of actually, categorizing game development. When somebody makes a video and says, in quote, the developers are so retarded or the developers are so stupid, I have come to learn that that statement is just patently, I would say void of reason and substance. And the reason I say that is because you have people that do different development aspects. And I'm going to do some juxtaposing between Cyberpunk 2077 and The Division 2 because I feel like those two games come from developers that have something regarding environments. So you have environmental artists, you have environmental developers, you have level designers, you have AI developers and people who code all kinds of different things. And then you have all kinds of different layers of people who are doing different jobs. So if you say something like the developers are stupid and don't know how to make a game, you've just basically spat on the work of your environmental designer, if you get what I mean. Now, the environmental designers for The Division 2, in my opinion, are like the best in the industry. They've literally brought to life two major American cities in almost a 1-to-1 ratio in the case of New York and a 1-to-1 ratio in the case of Washington, D.C. And they put it in a game, and everybody basically can play this game and go to Washington, D.C. for a small fee of $60 or $120. I mean, if you live somewhere in the world where, you probably have never been to any of these cities, even if you live in the United States and you've never been to any of these cities, which I haven't been to Washington, D.C., I feel like I've run through the entire map of D.C. at some point, or a big portion of it. I mean, isn't it the case with how realistic The Division 2 is? And if you look at even Cyberpunk, you have something like maybe even your vehicle designers. They took the vehicle line of, Keanu Reeves. He has a motorcycle company in partnership with somebody else, and they make custom bikes. And apparently these custom bikes are making their way into Cyberpunk 2077 as, basically realistic props that you as the player can actually, ride. Somebody took those props and designed and developed and adapted them for the game, and that person's own job is to just make it look good. Then you have the other person that's going to come back and make it a gameplay interactive aspect to it. And so what I'm trying to say is there are multiple complex levels and huge cogs in the wheel of game development that there's almost no reason to be befuddled by issues that arise when a game is having its technical, or I would say even logical difficulties like bugs or gear not working well. And, there's a very funny example that I say to one of my very good friends, Identity. I tell him all the time, I say, just imagine if the guy who designs this gear set says to everybody else, okay, we want this gear set to be doing 20% more damage, and we want it to be 20% increased damage. And somebody, downstream goes ahead and writes the code for it to be 20% amplified damage. And then it rolls into the patch, and then boom, it's broken. It's just a simple mathematical error in the logic that somebody wrote a code for, and now the entirety of the development team is now under the bus from the part of the gaming community. And I think, we've been criticizing a lot of these games that we've had at hand, and I don't think we've actually looked into what it takes to do this kind of project. I don't think we understand from the outside how much of a painstaking issue it is. Like I said, I've been doing a lot of research on what it takes to develop, even open world and all of that. And I got to watch this one video of a guy who built a log cabin in like a very small area of a forest. He just kind of put some trees around and then built a log cabin from scratch. And this guy took basically 2 hours to do this one little structure. And to think about that on a grand scale of things, to think about interior design engineers or developers or artists who come in a video game and they make sure things are placed in a correct order, that lighting is done in a way where if you walk into a room, it's inviting to you. All these little things go unnoticed in many cases. And I feel like because of the way the internet is so permeasive with the negative, side of things, it makes people who talk about the really good aspects sound like they're incongruent with what's going on. When in reality, I feel like if I'm talking about the highlights of a video game, even though the video game may have issues, I'm the same person based on what I've seen. Perspective really changes a lot of this stuff. And so looking at Tom Clancy's The Division 2 right now, we're back again in a spiral where the developers have gone ahead to increase enemy damage, in a sense. And I feel like probably what's happened is the development build that they were using to, roll down all these patches probably was an older build that had the enemy damage scaling the way it was when Warlords of New York came out. Or they probably just went back and tweaked those values. And so we're seeing the enemy damage, enemy aggression, enemy, explosion or AoE distance still be the same thing. And I wonder why this is the case. And the truth is, I really don't know why this is the case. Now, yes, I'm going to say this. Massive, for all I would say they do right, sometimes they make some really silly decisions. We've seen those decisions from time to time. And I think the reason we've seen those decisions from time to time is because it's an ongoing game. It's an ongoing, framework, so we get to see different patch upon different patch. And I think, again, there's another strand that this leads to, which is now getting to the point where I'm trying to figure out, and I think I'm probably getting close. Why did they make so many changes from the Division 1 to the Division 2? Could it be that the original concept, as good as it may have been, was just absolutely a chore to, implement, in the sense that if they build the first game in a specific way, right? The framework of that first game is most likely slightly different from the framework of the other game. I mean, yes, they're similar, but I know there's going to be differences. I mean, obviously we see, a lot of, I would say, physical differences and stuff, but underneath the code and the way both games work and the way some of the mechanics work, they're very different. I wonder if the Division 1's mechanics were just somewhat outdated or were just somewhat difficult and challenging, that they decided to somewhat build from scratch or remove certain aspects in order to refine the game itself and bring it to the community at large. Or maybe the game's underlying framework is just truly busted and the development team continues to figure out what in the world they have to do. There is no perfect game, and this is still the dilemma that I face. So when the developers at Cyberpunk 2077 say they need about 20 or so more days and it can make a big difference, I think as a gaming community, they gain more respect in that order, because it's 21 days, and there is, I mean, basically you can cancel your pre-order. The game isn't out yet. You should not pre-order in many cases. I don't think Cyberpunk was the game where after multiple delays, I think many people probably backed out, except maybe you bought yourself some, high-end edition, or you just wanted to pre-order because it's not a big deal. But, I think in the end, we're going to see a refined game, but I'm not certain yet. And, that the game is going to be refined on all platforms. And again, are people going to be forgiving if they find issues? Are people going to be, upset? How are people in the community going to react if for some reason, God forbid, yuck, a bug shows up in this game? I'll leave you all for now. Thank you so much for your time and audience. Let me hear your thoughts in the comment section about all of this fiasco going down. I think it's really interesting as a whole. Peace.